Let me give it to you. Hold on.
Well, Cindy, if you might be able to do it too, if you go down to where it says participants,
You can, yeah.
if you go down to and you send invite.
A copy in.
Everybody's in.
Let me give you her email. It might work. Hang on.
I don't think, I just let 2 more people in.
Yeah.
Is she in?
She's here. I see her name. She's in.
Bernice, you there? I think she's there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to start this show. Bradley, Bradley. Gary?
Just want me to go ahead?
No, I'm going to talk. This is the first FBomb in 7 years that I've had a feature reader. So I don't want to say there's a lot of pressure on you, but there's an inordinate amount of pressure on you. So welcome. And since its inception, Gary Fink has been co-editor with Meg Pokras of the annual anthology, Best Microfiction. His books have won the Flannery O'Connor Prize for Short Fiction, the Robert C. Jones Prize for Short Nonfiction Prose, and what is now the Wheeler Prize for Poetry. His collection of flash stories, The Corridors of Longing, the title story was reprinted in Best Small Fictions 2020, has just been published by Pelicanesis Press. Gary, you're up.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I'll say a little bit more about myself, I think, in a couple of minutes, but I took advantage of your invitation and invited 4 former students of mine and who went through the undergraduate program at Susquehanna University in creative writing. 2 of them live in our time zone, actually within walking distance practically. And 2 of them live in Arizona, and so they'll be here later. But I'm going to introduce both of them together and then just let one follow the other. The first is Chris Like, the second is Tony Zitta. Chris has one of those names that drives autocorrect crazy. If you try to do anything with his name, it keeps telling you it's like. And Tony's always at the end of a batch list, so I can find his name. But Chris, like a lot of young writers, is teaching at a couple different places, but both of these writers still have ties to Susquehanna. Chris teaches some literature and creative writing classes at Susquehanna University and also at Luzerne County Community College. He's had fellowships from the Vermont Studio Center and Imprint, and his works appeared in places like Gulf Coast Terrain and the Heavy Feather Review. He's currently working on a collection of flash pieces about people and places in rural Pennsylvania. My guess is you'll probably hear some of that in the next couple of minutes. And Tony has an MFA from the University of Maryland, and he has an honest-to-God full-time job, which is also pretty rare for young creative writing majors. So he coordinates and teaches in the Writers Institute at Susquehanna. He directs several of their projects, including The Apprentice Writer, which is an annual literary magazine that features the writing and photography of high school students from all over the United States. Actually, internationally, Tony, am I right? It says internationally. Yeah, we get some, okay. And he was previously a finalist for Glimmer Train's Very Short Fiction Award. And he's most recently had a full-length story in the North American Review. It's my pleasure to introduce both of these guys. Chris will go first, followed by Tony, and then I'll be back.
All right. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Paul, for this opportunity. I'm going to read 3 or 4 very kind of short pieces dealing with the people and places of Pennsylvania, like Gary said. So the first one is in town. Hearing the coyotes call at night, dogs barking responses, answers they didn't even know they had a tone for back to the ridgeline. I heard a coyote tricked a dog into breaking a chicken coop, how it pretended to be its friend, then jumped the fence, hen in mouth. Stray cats slowly disappear. We took a walk in the cemetery above our house, orbs on cell phone pictures, our son nestled into the wrap she wears to carry him. From the 2nd floor bedroom, I lie awake listening to the cars and trucks coming down the rural highway like a rainstorm. The breathing of her and him between us. The moon so bright it could have been daytime, overcast, a slight chance of rain. And we could use the rain. Have you seen the corn? The soybean fields turned yellow. Have you seen the chicken truck thunder down Main, then slow to turn? The crates stuffed full, the huffing mouths of the birds, and then that silence. About a woman who used to work in the NICU with my aunt. We're talking about co-sleeping and how we sit our son in his bouncy chair right outside the curtain when we need to take a shower and the other isn't home. And my Aunt Pam says some lady she works with at the NICU just lost her 6-month-old baby boy. She says her own dogs mauled him while she was in the shower. Holy fuck, we say. We look at our son bouncing on my mom's knee, not listening to any of it, but laughing, still laughing in that huffing belly giggle. And my aunt says she was in the shower and her husband was asleep in the other room. He works night shift or something, and this lady, who I don't believe we got her name, needed to get in the shower for work. So she gave her little boy a snack and sat him on the living room floor while she jumped in quick. My aunt says the lady said it was only a few minutes. She didn't even wash her hair. And when she came back, the dogs were literally chewing on the boy. She had to beat them off of him. I wondered what the snack was, but my aunt didn't know. What kind of dogs were they, I asked. And my aunt says she thinks some kind of Rottweiler mix, but she doesn't really know. They were the husband's dogs. My wife is watching our son now, still bouncing with my mom, only 4 months old. She's not listening anymore when my aunt says the lady filed for divorce, quit her job at the NICU. I can't even imagine, I say. And my aunt says, the cops said they would put the dogs down for what they'd done, but my aunt says she doesn't think they took the dogs. Are they still living there, I asked? And my aunt said she thinks the husband kept them. Bright flights. Have you ever seen a bird fly in the early, still dark of morning? I read somewhere that birds become blind at night, that if they don't make it back to their nest before dark, their babies freeze to death. Under a street light, there's a dove bobbing heavy on a wire. How many of those lights must it visit before it finds its way back? My cousin tells me heroin is like heaven, and he says when he OD'd, there wasn't a bright light, but instead purple darkness, distant warping glows like closing your eyes after staring at the sun. And then that man back home in York who left his 8-month-old son in the car to get dope he called divine. I wonder how many streetlights he found himself following, thinking the next one would be the right one, the way back to the car, until he awakened 4 hours later, and there, under the shine of the streetlight, his son, blue and gray, still wrapped to the car seat. In a small town during a pandemic. We take walks daily with our son, make a loop around town to feel the openness of the woods and fields to one side, the 100-year-old houses on the other with dark windows and shadows, a woman smoking a cigarette on her porch. But on the far edge, we see a positive pregnancy test thrown in the roadside weeds. Last week, we saw a used condom a few streets over, broken blue robin eggs under the corner tree, an ant in the yoke. And today, turkey vultures, count them. There are 4 circling the field like the crib mobile spinning above our sun, belly up, eyes wide, listening, watching. And there's something lying out there in the field. We wait for the night to become loud. We wait for the fluttering of feathers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, so I guess it's my turn. Can everybody hear me all right? Just want to make sure. All right, cool. Yeah, thank you, Gary, and thank you, Paul. This is really great to be reading in front of all of you. Just a note about my process, I guess, with this story, with really all of my writing. It's heavily autobiographical. This piece that I'm going to be reading to you right now comes from, I had some friends in high school. There was this girl that we knew, and we called her Shack Girl because we believed that she lived in a shack down the street. And they even wrote a song about her and recorded this song, and that has really stuck with me, and that concept. So this is called Shack Girl, for Shack Girl. We called her Shack Girl because she lived in a shack. That's what everyone said, at least. Just off the freeway over by our high school, near some cornfields, recently sold to develop just around the bend from the volunteer fire station that burned down, near a stop sign turned so crooked it almost reads Potts. There, hidden by dead arborvitae and tall grass growing into hay, there was this cindered driveway. A fading yellow sign in a gutter announced no outlet. No outlet means nowhere. That driveway led to nowhere, and that nowhere was where Shack Girl lived. We imagined all these boarded up windows blocking out any trace of light, the cause of her pale skin, transparent and milky like wax paper. We pretended the nail polish on her cracked and uneven fingernails was just painted on blood from the scabs she picked. We dreamed up how the roof leaked even when it wasn't raining, explaining her straggly hair. How she cleaned her teeth with unwound paper clips instead of toothpicks. How her only mirror was the kitchen sink reflecting back its overflow. How her siblings were just stray dogs, musty and lean, all the same. And when Shack Girl was born, we even believed that her own mother wasn't there for the delivery. Shack Girl didn't speak. Never in class anyway. Never raised her hand. Maybe she didn't understand the concept of what raising her hand meant. Or maybe she didn't have a voice at all. It was almost impressive how she made so much effort to not make an effort. Sometimes she failed a test because her handwriting was so bad the teacher couldn't read the answers. She never changed her clothing in gym class. She didn't take the bus to school. No parents we knew of driving up her around either. She walked, slow, careful, as if with every step she had to remind herself to put one foot in front of the other. Most days we could find Shack Girl drooping down the halls, feet limp and pigeon-toed, finding her way to the school nurse, running her hands along the lockers. It always looked like she was holding herself up. We knew she stayed there over lunch, even though she probably thought no one could possibly know. We learned to skip class and get away with it, pretending either to come from or go to the bathroom. We felt invisible. Wander around long enough and the halls reveal everything sooner or later. The school nurse always gave Shack Girl a Sprite, like when other kids came in with sour stomachs. For Shack Girl, this was lunch. She could keep herself busy and full for the rest of the day, sucking away at the bottom of that can with that straw, going for every last drop like it was all life had to offer. Maybe once there was this bright and happy kid believing in tomorrow, singing that red-headed orphan song or something like that. Maybe she liked to draw with blue-colored pencil, read books, or stare up at posters of Chad Michael Murray hanging on their wall, wear eyeshadow and glitter, play music loud, dance in her room, stuff like that. But we only knew Shack Girl as this silent, checked out, dandruff teen waiting for a moment to leave at the end of the day. Once outside, she would sit around enjoying what looked like nothing, an unlit cigarette sliding out of her lip, walking back and forth, up and down, the curb crumbling in the parking lot, all bashed in and sketchy, not even the skate rats bothered making it a spot. Cars would roll by, leaving with seats packed full of parents and tired students, lucky to catch a glimpse of what always came next. School safety officer creeps up behind, hanging over her shadow, smells what we all do, pushes Shack Girl onto cinders, drags her down the lot, carts her inside, on the way to the vice principal's place. Shack Girl was always pulled in after hours for this or for that. It was actually probably something drug related. We heard pills. Troubled youth is a term we've heard adults throw around more than once in hopes to describe the situation. But that just feels so off, like incorrect. She's just Shack Girl. Listen closely. There. She's still around, walking down the street, in the halls, her shoes flopping, wearing against the asphalt, the concrete, the carpet mats, the squeaky green tiles, her bald soles whining rubber, echoing like a basketball court. Skirt, skirt, skirt. She's saying something. Thank you.
Tony, thank you.
Thanks, Chris and Tony. Now I got to accept Paul's challenge to produce something here as a featured writer. Really, thanks a lot, Paul, for making the invitation. It gives me a chance to, introduce some of my former students to the world, to all of you who are part of this. It gives me a chance to hold up a new book and see how's that work. Anyway, I don't know. Yeah, there you can. It looks like it's upside down and backwards in the camera. And it's my daughter's artwork. So I got to give her a plug as well. It's called The Corridors of Longing. It came out like about 2 weeks ago. What I'm going to do is read 4 of the shorter pieces. There's 72 stories in here. Think of it as a trailer to promote the book. I hope you enjoy some of these. The first one's called Turning 13 in the 20th Century. Because her clarinet is damaged, she's doing homework in the back of the shadowed auditorium instead of finishing sugar time when 3 boys surround her. Without speaking, they lift her skirt. As if she is a specimen, they stare, then vanish through an exit. On stage, the junior high band packs their instruments. Like them, she waits for the bell, but before she rises, she decides to never again play that clarinet. Because she is close to the door, she can turn her back to the stage and leave without talking to anyone in the band. She is first into the lobby's light. She hurries to her bus in that skirt, books pressed against her chest, and sits beside a girl who chatters about the spring semi-formal pre-prom, she calls it, 8th grade, an exit to where dreams turn real. At home, she stands near her bedroom mirror, turns, then turns again to examine that skirt for its invitation. How what she sewed the summer before has included touch me or welcome within its gemstone aquamarine. How it has been raised like an experiment to see her thighs in her pale blue cotton underwear. How she has been assessed. She is unable to read anything, even when she slides the skirt off and runs her fingers over and under its surface, where boys have handled it like a flag. By now, she knows she will never tell her mother. Because the clarinet is a rental, her father, when she quits the band, will be glad to save one more expense. She hangs the skirt in her closet, moving it to the far left where the clothes she's outgrown wait for the annual Goodwill bagging. The skirt passed to a girl who will admire herself after she's had time to adjust to the price of hand-me-down. She will twirl that skirt up and out as if she had once sewn it herself, her smooth, pale legs bared to the waist. The second one, my COVID flash fiction, is called Worship. As everyone at your Zoom meeting begins the odd goodbyes of isolation, Denise says, "Would you like to see our butterfly collection?" None of the 8 face-filled panels blacks out. Denise tilts her laptop so the camera shows the dining room wall behind her is nearly covered with hung boxes of butterflies. You count 12, 9 in each box, 108 butterflies that look to you identical. It's our best wall, Denise says. They come dry in the mail, then Harry moistens them and fixes them in place. He builds all the boxes himself. She has never mentioned the butterflies at the meetings before the lockdown. You search the faces in the panels looking for a match to your wonder. 2 panels go dark. We're just getting started, Denise says. She stands, the room swaying through her camera. She carries the laptop closer to the wall. All the butterflies seem to have the same deep blue with golden specks in a simple, consistent pattern. They have names, Denise says, beginning a slow pan across the boxes. If I turned these frames over, you'd see them on the back. They're all the same species, but more like cousins than brothers and sisters. 4 panels are dark. Harry is in self-quarantine, Denise says, but so far he's fine. He has a new set to keep him occupied. He's so incredible with the tweezers and pins and the syringe. She moves her laptop closer to the wall, holds it steady. You think of an atlas you once owned, how the biggest cities were enlarged in panels. We have so many walls, Denise says. The butterflies are raised on farms. They are plentiful. Eventually, we'll be surrounded. Don't these look well cared for? Don't they look as if they could fly? You are alone with Denise. This virus will bring you back to her dining room for months or longer, another wall sprouting something like an ivy of boxes. What she will show, and you will call beauty still life, while those others who meet with you go quickly dark into their ordinary private lives. You vow to look up the species. To ask her now seems taboo, an interruption of worship. You imagine Harry busy with a new specimen, carefully restoring something dry and fragile under a brilliant light. While you stare and stare, all that's left of Denise is breathing. Some of these stories are funny, but they're all longer. So you're, this one's called Cow. It snorts and stares at us, the sides of its white spotted black body heaving. My 2-year-old says cow and points. There isn't a soul in sight, no neighbors gawking, no farmer chasing after and hollering out bossy or patches at this half-grown cow that suddenly bellows out a sound so long and mournful that my 5-year-old crawls to me, spilling her teacup and begins to wail while the 2-year-old loops her arms around my neck in a silent chokehold. 2 miles from anything resembling a farm, a cow in a Washington Street yard is more than an uncommon thing. Yet here it is. I want to say thundering, but that would be a lie. Loping to a stop right in front of where my girls and I are having a tea party under the willow in our corner lot. That cow isn't leaving like I hoped it might. It seems unwilling to trot into the street beyond the willow. Our backyard is fenced in, nowhere to go but backwards that will keep it on grass. With a huff that sounds like it's deflating, it settles on the lawn. There is a string of lots, but ours is the only one on our side of the street with a tree of any size. The rest are dogwoods and weeping cherries and a lot of those evergreen bushes shaped into balls or cones or just trimmed flat like a military haircut. Maybe that cow is looking for shade large enough to fit inside. And that's what I am afraid of when it stands again and noses under that tree with us, the girls going mute and clutching me. Daddy, the young one whispers. Daddy, the older one says aloud. Daddy. The cow nuzzles against me. It licks my face, and my daughters, seeing that big slurping tongue, stop calling for their father, who's been gone for 3 weeks now. The younger one reaches out her hand and touches the cow's nose, saying wet and letting go of my neck. The older one silently touches the cow's face, feeling the texture of its skin. For nearly a minute, the cow stands still and lets them touch. When it turns away, tail switching behind it and slapping against the drooping branches, both girls say, "Mommy," at the same time, and we watch that cow amble away, beginning to gather speed as it crosses lawns until it becomes a speck, something we stare at, even though by now it is so small, it could be anything at all. I thank my wife for that story. It's her story way back in the day when we lived in upstate New York. And the cow actually came and we actually lived on Washington Street. But the rest of it, like you do with autobiography, is you make it yours somehow if you turn it into story. This last story has a different sort of tone, I hope. It's called "The Earth," she says, "is humming." My wife, who reads more than I do, mostly books I'd never open, says the ground is always moving beneath our feet. Not an earthquake, she tells me, but plates that shift below the continents and the oceans. There's even a hum, she says, when I turn away before she's finished. A hum nobody can hear, right? I say, expecting that to end things, but she doesn't let it go. It's audible for some, she says, a low murmur that keeps a few of us awake. You too, I say, though she doesn't seem to hear. There's a woman who says that hum is like torture. Since she started hearing it, she gets headaches, nosebleeds, and insomnia. Not you, I try, but she isn't listening. Somebody's recorded it. He says it sounds like what a fetus hears in the womb. We have no children, so I get what she's working toward, letting science criticize me for our empty house. I wait for it, her going bitter, but she says, I have a story for you, one I just read this morning, but you have to come outside with me and go for a walk into the desert. Not far, just out there 100 yards or so, far enough so we're alone. It's supposed to rain for once, I say. We'll get soaked. Just say you'll walk, she says, and I fall in beside her. Out there, every spot looks nearly the same, but she settles on a place between two young saguaros and begins. Spade-foot toads use their back legs to burrow backwards when this earth gets too dry, she says. They go deep enough to be cool farther than you think. So they're all way down there now, I say. Yes, she says, maybe 10 feet, maybe waiting, half sleeping for weeks or months until they hear the sound of raindrops on the surface. They need to hear rain before they claw their way back up. She holds out her hands just as I feel the first drops. You think they're coming up tonight, I say, and she looks skyward as if she's wishing down a storm. Sometimes it takes years for a downpour, she says. Then one night there's enough rain to prompt the toads to surface where they sing and are sung to and mate. I look up too, the rain pelting down now, and she takes my hand. They synchronize their song, she says. They bunch together because owls look for single targets, and this keeps them safe. The owls think the earth is singing, I say. Yes, she says, yes. And she lays my hand on her belly, nods, and we begin to sing. Thanks to all of you for listening.
Barry, that was terrific. Thank you.
Paul, it's all yours.
Okay. Our next reader is Jolene McElwain. Her flash has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net and appears in Craft, Letro, Fractured Lit, Cincinnati Review, Janius Literary, 2 Pure Slush anthologies, and elsewhere. Her work was included in the 2019 Best Small Fictions Anthology. It was named finalist for Glimmer Trains and River Styx contests, as well as a semi-finalist in American Short Fiction's Shorter Fiction Contest. She was born and currently lives in a small town in the Appalachian Plateau of Western Pennsylvania. Her collection of short stories, Sidle Creek, will be released in May of 23 with Melville House. Jolene.
Thanks, Paul. And thanks to the readers already that read. Wow, they were all beautiful. So what I decided I would do is read 2 of the pieces, 2 flashes, 2 that were the first 2 that I had published. And they're both in the collection that's going to be coming out with Melville House in May. So they're both, one's a micro and one's a flash. So I'll start with Seed to Fool. After you've felled the tree and dragged it from the site, hauled it to the mill, one of the first things you do is scale it, measure to find out how many board foot it can yield. Always measure the small end. According to the Vermont log rule, a log with a diameter of 11 inches cut into a 9-foot length offers up about 45 board feet. One that's 36 inches in diameter, same length, should yield 486 board feet. Then you have to grade it. Check for knots and branch stubs, seams with ingrown bark, ring shake, gum spots in black cherry. I started to teach our daughter Myra how to grade and scale, and she's shown promise. She has a head for numbers, for recall. We've had this business for 35 years. My father sought out permission from the bishop to start up before I was born, and he's been milling every season since. Now I'm Sawyer, and he's more known for his work as a hammerman or sawsmith, fixing our saws and those of nearby mills, Amish and English. Myra's interest lies more in his job. By the time she was 4, she knew the difference between a cross peen, twist face, and a dog head. She knew how to measure the blade tension and dishing when she was only 8. Comes natural to her to write things, She doesn't even flinch when he pounds out saws. Then there's a saw curve, the width of the cut made by the saw. That loss has to be factored in too. I can tell you exactly what each cut will do. I can tell you what type of cut is best for each kind of job. Quarter sawn, rift sawn, flat sawn. I can tell you the type of wood or how wet it is by the sound it makes when it meets the blade. What I can't tell you is how much my wife Hannah's been hurt by how I've cut her, or how wide the kerf is that I've laid upon her heart. When you marry, scripture says you're joined together, but in truth, to do that, you have to be cut away from your family. You cut away from yourself. These cuts are necessary. But I've done more than that. I've given her another seed that wouldn't grow. My wife Hannah is like a quarter sawn board, the kind that's best for flooring or treads on stairs. It's stable, doesn't easily produce slivers or warp or cup like flat sawn would. Flat sawn's best only for visual appeal, like my eldest brother's wife. Rift sawn's the worst cut of all, like my mother-in-law. That's why it was so hard to take when Hannah slammed the screen door on me after I showed her the casket. I'd built it straight and true from wood I'd myself sanded and stained, rubbed with linseed until my hands were raw. Too small, she whispered, only that. But little Daniel fit easily into it, despite thick blankets she'd wrapped him in. Perhaps she thought her love for him might somehow expand his small body, might help him to continue his growth, even underground. It's 31.5 by 13.25 by 11 inches, I said, as if to convince her. Myra stood at my side. Hannah just stared at us and shook her head back and forth and back again and again. I used poplar, known for its straight grain, uniformity of texture, its lightweight, though that never mattered. For when I carried what I'd made to the grave, my boy inside my box, I could barely find the strength. I thought Hannah would be pleased. She'd been the one to find the small stand of poplars near the Sidle Creek. She used to go there and lie on the ground beside the creek, the swell of our sun part of her silhouette, and twirl their tulip-shaped leaves round her second finger and search the tops of the trees to spot their blossoms. But she didn't even touch the box, turned her head when I told her it was cherry stain I'd used. She'd have none of it. And that story came from, in Western Pennsylvania where I live, we have an old order Amish community that's about 10 miles from where I live. So we kind of have this sort of hybrid community between English and Amish, and always have the Amish around working with us. My husband's an excavator, so he works with them in his contracting business, and we have them as neighbors. So that was one that I had come up with whenever I spent a lot of time at the sawmills waiting for our tree logs to be sawn into boards that we needed. And this next one, it came out in Pure Slush, and I think Paul and I were in the same anthology. And this one's called Angling. She woke one morning after a dream about her fisherman friend, Van, who died too young, with the sensation of a hook snagged on the inside of her cheek close to her lip, like a piece of fishing line attached from her drooped mouth to him wherever he lingered now. Her son didn't catch it at first, and when she slurred, "Does my mouth look right?" he answered, "Yeah, you look fine, Mom." But he also wrinkled his brows and turned his eyes to his father, saying in a tone she rarely heard now that he was growing into a man, "Dad." Her husband worried she'd stroked. Her father had one, and her grandfather, grandmother, and 3 uncles. He called 911, promised he'd be right behind her, and before they lifted her in the ambulance, he kissed her good side. The doctor assured, "It's not a stroke, it's temporary." "What about my eye?" she said. "It won't stop crying." He marked with a lopsided star excessive tearing on the list of symptoms he handed her. 2 weeks, you'll be back to normal, he said. But she knew what happened. Van had caught her again, just when she thought she'd been healed of him. And she peered out the window as her husband drove them back home along Route 5 and that winding, flooded Sidle Creek where she'd once talked too much and spooked the rainbow and brook trout, sending them into deeper runs. Had Van used a dress treble hook meant to lure her with its flashy feathers, or a sea wash meant to leave her less damaged by his memory, or a jig hook to ensure the set? She could see his smile, his eyes, almost touch his fingers again as he crimped 5 split shot to the line to weight it down. After the 2 weeks her doctor promised, her face righted, and Van's face faded again, rippled back to blurs, caught deep in a bat cast, tangled in a tree she couldn't find. Thanks.
Thank you, Jolene. You know, the accent helps your stories a lot.
What was that?
The accent helps your stories a lot.
Yeah, I have that Western PA twang going there. Oh, and here's the cover. Here's the cover of the book. They just gave me the cover a couple weeks ago. So it's called Sidle Creek.
Looks great.
I hope you all like it. If you get a chance to get a copy, I would love that. If not, you can see some of my work online. So thank you so much, Paul, for giving me the opportunity to read tonight. I really appreciate it.
Well, you know, write the name of the book and where it can be bought and put in the chat.
Oh, okay, I'll do that. Thanks.
Andrea Marcuse's work has appeared in Gettysburg Review, Cutbank, River Styx, River Teeth, Citron Review, and others. She's received recognition in a range of competitions, including Glimmer Train, Roller Review, New Letters, and Southampton Review. Andrea, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. And it's really great to be with all these wonderful writers. You guys have put the bar really high tonight. So I'm going to read 2 very short flash fictions. They're related and they're works in progress. So the final versions might not be like this, but I'm working on them. The first one is called U.S. Threat Forecast. Did you know that frogs grow noisy before it rains? And dogs and cats always sense tornadoes looming. Also, wind is silent. We only hear it when it blows against something. Even though little can be learned about people from their facial features, our noses can detect 1 trillion smells. Meteorologists say that lightning strikes 20 million times a year, but only kills about 400 people. And hailstones can grow as large as baseballs. 316 people are shot daily, and over 48,000 die each year from gunshot wounds. Bullets from an AR-15 travel almost 3 times faster than one from a handgun and liquefy organs, leaving a smashed cavity the size of a grapefruit. Although wives' tales say otherwise, lightning often hits in the same location twice, sometimes more. And cats really do land on their feet. Did you know it takes blood 60 seconds to make a complete circuit of the body? Scientists tell us that full moons don't impact human behavior, but violence rates rise along with the air temperature. A simple way to learn the air temperature is to count the number of cricket chirps in 15 seconds and add 40. One definition of the word execution is to carry out a plan. Did you know blood tastes as salty as the ocean? In time, people grow accustomed to violence, especially young children. And the only muscle that never tires out in the human body is the beating heart. And sound, whether the blast of an assault rifle or the tinkle of a baby's laugh, won't ever carry in the absolute silence of outer space. We learn fact after fact, but still our horror fades every time, like the snow melts away each spring. Rain and tears are nothing alike. Drops of rain are flat on the bottom and curved on the top. So that's the first one. This one is called While Running Errands at the Mall. Remember the faces, a page of small squares, 30 of them. Zooming on each face, you expected blank dead eyes, a curled lip, but there weren't any. Only ordinary young men, some with intelligent eyes, others with confident stares. A few looked vulnerable or afraid, but mostly they were as nondescript as the man you saw this morning in the Target store parking lot, leaving his blue Toyota RAV4, both of you locking your doors with the electronic beep just seconds apart. Or the guy in the plaid work shirt hanging around Home Depot in the wood stain and paintbrush aisle while you scan the same spot for sandpaper to smooth your steps' front railing. On your way to checkout, you saw a man sporting a black t-shirt and sinister scowl who slouched against a shelf stocked with pillows. This is hardly the mark of a killer. What can you learn from a face? Isn't it the doorway to the soul? Staring at the faces, you tried to see what was behind the gaze. Pinpoint that seed from which sprouted the planning, scouting, executing. From where did this impulse emerge? Why one man and not another? You study the experts, read posts on Facebook and Twitter, lots of hate, name-calling, toxic white male, white supremacists, snippets about shooters' backgrounds, agitated, made threats close to the event, history of physical abuse, drawn to violent images, loner, school troublemaker. People always say this, but these words don't square with the searing rip you feel inside each time it happens, or how you start and are ready to sprint, even when the bang you hear is just a car backfiring. And each time it happens, you asked, why can't we do something? What's happened to us? Your mind moves to those people thousands of years ago who used to tear their garments in grief. At least they did something. Because you know that in a few weeks, your terror and fury will fade along with everyone else, except the victims and those who love them. Life gets in the way, like today, when you were shopping at Home Depot for sandpaper, steel wool, and metal primer. Don't turn away this time. Don't let the subject drop until it happens again. Stop. Really think about the faces of those men on your computer screen. Imagine each as a baby gazing into his mother's eyes, or as a 2-year-old and his passion for plain vanilla ice cream, or a 4-year-old and his wonderment at the first snowfall. Hear the ring of his little boy laugh. Listen to his dreams at 9 of Spider-Man and Luke Skywalker when he slips into bed at night, filled with such excitement for the next day that he's unable to sleep. How did hatred, instead of wonder, nourish this being and not love and kindness? How did fantasies of AK-47 bullets mowing down children, shoppers, nightclubbers, churchgoers feed him, strengthen his limbs, trigger finger, seduce him like a lover? And not the young man beside you this morning at the checkout counter, who wore a short haircut with a skinny braid running down his back, and who was drumming his fingers as he stood in line to buy a green polka dot shower curtain. Thank you.
Tough, Andrea, very good. Um, We're gonna have one more reader and then two of Gary's people will read. So Francine Witt has a new book out called Just Outside the Tunnel of Love. You want to show it to everyone?
Yes. Once again, this is it. It's not, yeah. Oh, sorry. I'll put the link in the chat to Amazon. And I'm just going to read one story from it. It's called Potato Saga, because you probably haven't heard a potato story in a while. Potato Saga, and it's in 4 parts. 1, a lady falls in love with a potato. Why? Well, it's a handsome potato, so there's that. But when she fishes it out of the potato bag and hefts it in her hand, its eyes are facing up at her, and God knows it's been a while since she's been looked at. She names the potato Harold and etches a smile into its skin. She sets it in a cool, dry place to keep it fresh and longing for her. She strokes the curve of its forehead, the smooth bubble of it. She will buy it a beret, she thinks. She coos that she will be right back, shows up minutes later, negligee and sex perfume. 2. It doesn't take long before the potato has had enough and rolls itself over to the open kitchen window. A potato's life, it reasons, is not very long, and it's got to make the best of it. It rolls past trees and loamy fields. It gets a homesick ache for the heft of cool dirt on its back. Potato wonders if it ever had a mother. Do vegetables have mothers? It cries through his mouth peel into the world that is sudden and huge around it. Nobody listens. The potato wonders if it made a mistake. 3. The potato chef asks the potato if it wants to be mashed or French fried. The potato chef doesn't usually pick up potatoes on the side of the road, but this one looked so lost. And also, the potato chef is trying new things like calling it road potato or found potato on the menu. He certainly can't serve the potato baked, not with that weird-ass smile carved into its peel. The potato chef is really a line cook. His boss found him one day rolling around on the side of the road. Now the line cook likes to pretend that he is a potato chef, thinks of the mouth that this potato might end up in, the teeth gnash and savor juices breaking it down. Mashed or French fried, the first decision the line cook has made in months. And if he is not mistaken, a very sad look in the potato's withery eyes, winning out over the potato's silly smile. The potato chef straightens up, picks up a knife. Potato murder or mercy killing? The potato chef couldn't say for sure. 4. The lady is dressed up nice and fine, cloche and hatpin, etc. First time out in a week, that lonely week since Harold disappeared. The restaurant buzzes around her, clink and clatter and Frank Sinatra. Good to treat yourself, she thinks. Hunger is rumbling her stomach. The waiter takes her order. Good choice, madame. Very special. So special, in fact, that the line cook brings it to the table himself. The potato soup she ordered in Harold's honor. The line cook beams as she takes her first ferocious sip. I'm so glad you like it, madame, the line cook says. This potato in this soup is no ordinary potato. What do you know? It had a smile carved into its peel. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Francine. Thank you. Gary, you can take over from here.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. I promised you I'd be back, so here I am, all the way from Arizona, Melissa Goodrich and Dana Deal, two other former students. What can I say about them? Maybe the most interesting thing is they've done a collaborative collection. It's called The Classroom from Goldwake Press, in case you're interested. One has a master's degree from Arizona State. One has one from the University of Arizona. And yet do you still live right down the street from each other? Okay, all right. But really two brilliant students, frankly, from about 10 years ago, as far as when they graduated from Susquehanna. Dana has other books. She has one called Our Dreams Might Align. She has a chapbook called TV Girls that won the New Delta Review chapbook contest. She's been published in a whole bunch of journals: North American Review, Passages North, Necessary Fiction, Mid-American Review, lots of really excellent journals to have your work appear in. Melissa's work has been all over the place as well: American Short Fiction, Artful Dodge, Kenyon Review Online, Passages North, and others. She has a collection of stories, Daughters of Monsters, where I think I was anthropomorphized or something or other. She has an evil character named Gary who meets his end somehow in there. She also won the Passages North Fiction Prize, a Tucson Festival of Books Fiction Award, all kinds of things. In particular, I remember the 2013 AWP Intro Award. These two students, along with Tony and Chris, are the kinds of students that make our program look good, and I get a piece of that as well. Dana, why don't you read first, and then Melissa, and I'll just let one follow the other.
Thank you. Hi, it's so great to be here. Actually, in a reading with Gary, such an honor. So thank you for having me and Melissa. Okay, so I'm going to read just one flash fiction piece that was published in X-Ray not too long ago. And I wrote this after watching Jaws and sequels to Jaws and a lot of other shark movies, which you'll pick up on. The title is The Sharks Took the Rest. There are so many ways to kill the shark. Electrocute it with an underline power cable. Shove a grenade down its throat. Feed it a pressurized scuba tank. Shoot. Wait for the boom. Killing a shark is always personal. The shark ate your wife. The shark ate your son. The shark ate the beauty whose skin you'd noticed on the beach. The way sweat beaded on her collarbones. The way salt water pooled in her belly button. Every shark attack victim is someone's daughter, someone's son, someone's lover. But the shark is hungry, hungry, hungry. It will take everything, and then it will take the rest. There are not enough sons or daughters or lovers in the world to satiate this shark. Shark is power. Shark is bites. Shark is teeth, constantly replacing themselves, tens of thousands of teeth over the course of a lifetime. Shark is 450 million years of inherited memories. Memories of dinosaurs shaking the earth's crust, of skies painted with volcanic ash, of oceans choked in ice, of the first men in the first ships, keels slicing the ocean into units. Despite all of this, in the end, the shark always dies. Maybe once the world had room for an appetite as big as a shark's, but not anymore. If only it had minded its own business. If only it had kept the deep, subsisting on the corpses of whales, on squid, on sleeping fish. It could have grown old in the dark Arctic waters, outliving our children and their children as well. But that wasn't enough for the shark. It had to swim to the surface, had to venture into the warm shallows, had to feel the sunlight on its back. When the shark explodes, you'll be surprised to see it was blood and guts and entrails and organs all along. A part of you expected it to be made of stone or of mist or to simply disappear like the monsters in your favorite horror movies, leaving no body behind. When the gulls clear, all that will be left of the shark are teeth. You'll spend the rest of your life with your eyes on the ocean, waiting for the shark that will take the dead one's place. That's it.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry I used your name, Gary, once in a story. I was in grad school and no one knew any Garys. And I'm glad Dana read a story inspired by film and TV, because I am also reading a flash piece that is in that same vein. This is called Hallmark Christmas Movie Plot Generator. A sensitive guy in plaid arrives at your door. He's selling magazines. You can tell he's sensitive by the way he says, "As a matter of fact, I'm first in my magazine selling league," and asks you to high five him. You oblige, and your fingertips linger on his fingertips. He looks cute under the Christmas lights. He says you can help him by asking him a simple question, and then he feeds you the question. The question is, "Do you love me?" He says, "I'm so glad you asked me. Yes." B, a sensitive guy in plaid arrives at your door. He's missing his dog. You can tell he's sensitive because his nostrils are flaring and his buttons are slightly buttoned against one another wrong, and part of his collar is inched up like it wants a bite of his neck. A bite. He says, "Short-haired, stumpy legs, she's gonna kill me." You frown into your cowl neck. The pronoun she is a stinger. It hurts so bad that when the stocky short hair pup stumbles into your periphery, you can't quite see it. Your lips are unforming a kiss. "What's her name?" you ask, hurt, even though you don't know him, even though when you close the door, he'll basically disappear off the earth. C, it's late one Christmas. Some guy is at your door. Your Christmas lights are blinking white to red to white to red, and underneath them, his face is like a police light. He's grinning at you through the peephole. When you take a step back, he says, "I can see you." Or he says, "I know you're alone." Or, "I love you. I'm so glad you asked me." Or maybe he isn't at your door. He's at your window, actually, and you're babysitting, only you don't know anyone with a baby. Guys, whose baby is this? It's the first scene of the movie, so all you are is a deer. All you are is a house conspicuously huge and dark. You don't know you can't die. Don't know there's heroic music as a volunteer firefighter swerves the corner. All you know is to wrap the baby up so that it's closer to you. And when it starts to snow, it isn't at all like the movies. The footsteps ringed around the house, the serial killer cornfield all frostbit under the moon. D, it's a small town, and in this town, doors don't lock. They don't need to. Ha! Your Christmas lights freeze overnight and make a crackling sound when the bulbs turn on, which makes no sense because they are LED and it isn't like firewood kindling. A sensitive guy in plaid is hauling a Christmas tree out his front door and into the yard, ornaments crashing off and shattering on his walkway. You can tell he's sensitive because he's your neighbor and high school crush, and sensitive puffs of air are coming out his mouth as he drags the tree to the street, although you could do without those crash break sounds. You wrap your wool knit cardigan tighter around yourself and feel the molecules in your toes start to shrink. You want to be that tree. You want to be dragged by your hair to the side of the road. E, an old flame arrives at your door, but you don't see him. You're inside the house having a fight with your sensitive guy in plaid, and he's starting to behave not so sensitively, yanking the Christmas tree out of its stand, and the little dog you had before you got engaged is starting to yap. It's gotta be a yap. This dog is a reflection of your character. What the fuck are you doing, you say? He doesn't answer because this is the early mid of the movie. This is the part where you realize all your mistakes, your big city choices, everything your bug-eyed sweater-wearing chihuahua represents. You watch your sensitive guy drag the tree outside like he is making a point of it, wrecking all the ornaments you inherited from your grandmother. This scene isn't about your old flame, and yet it is, because he's there, pressed against the side of your house, imprinting his place in your story. You don't know it yet because right now you are dialing the police. Your tree is demolished, ruined, public. You are trying not to tremble. It is Christmas. F. It's a small town, and you're sensitive. You've always been sensitive. You go into the forest sometimes looking like an Instagram model with your hair in effortless curls. You don't know how pretty your hair is, no matter how long you spend smoothing in product. You wear sweaters with arms so long your hands disappear. You find yourself in well-lit nooks, eyelashes batting. When a stranger arrives at your door, you look at him like you've never seen a pair of human eyes before. He's there selling magazines. He's there because his rambunctious little boy threw a snowball at your car. He's there because he's a widower and his dead wife loved red doors. You turn around and yes, it's red and true as Christmas. Thanks so much.
Really good story. Thank you. You've done well, Gary. Gloria, are you going to read tonight or listen?
Yes.
Pardon me?
Oh, yes, I will.
You're up then.
Okay. I was in a weird mood thinking of vowels and consonants. So these two short pieces are from that. The first one is Flash. A. He murdered A this afternoon, so now many words don't exist. I have no way of communicating anymore, but neither do you. It was a hot afternoon. The sun is making us all sweat. Only one fraction of A was found in a pile of blood, too red to pick up. Some on the police force barked. Did I tell you I have police in my family? The Italian mafia wanted to kill them. They were smarter, kept guns in the cellar. In a small town like this, everyone knows everyone's business. Somewhere, someone had binoculars and was watching. Rumors spread around about who did it. Turns out it was C. They were wrong. C laughed as he was arrested, curved himself backwards, and stabbed a police officer in the throat. After this, no one could ever speak again. And the second piece is called Don't You. Don't you ever want to stop the vowels from coming out of your mouth? Even on this fall day with leaves dropping off trees, don't you want to step on them, hear the crunch? Don't you want to be in silence just for a little bit, feel the breeze on skin? Out of my mouth comes consonants you never hear. Ignored, I try to speak louder so you will. Something is missing in our lives when the vowels and consonants don't connect. I turned a corner in life to find beauty in trees, falling like leaves into long sentences, whereas you have laryngitis, missing the bright colors, the sound of air. It is too late for you. It's apparent you can only be mulch, buried into the earth. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Gloria. Cindy Rasmus is the editor of Yellow Mama. And you're up.
Hi, guys. I'm going to read a story from my collection, Hail Tiger, called Dorm Nights. That was the year 77. Elvis died. Were you waitressed in that whole hole in Atlantic City? while resorts were still being built all summer long. Where's the casino, the drunks asked you. Despite they didn't tip you. Few people did. Back then you were sullen and shy, lumpy, with frizzy hair, angly earrings you hoped made you look like a gypsy. Hippie looking, though hippies were out. You were dying to go back to school. The dorm was the same, except some sloppy, smelly girl had moved to the third floor, Mary Alice, dragging a giant stuffed dinosaur and fiance behind her. A geek named Hal, who nobody else would want. Hal wore thick glasses, had an overbite, was an adventurous soul. He dug ice fishing. Could you believe it? Mary Alice was always nice, especially to you. So nice, she made you feel like shit. But so many roommates. Who could live with a slob like you? CJ painstakingly straightened your hair, but stole the money you hid behind your desk drawer. Sweet Neely had a wooden leg. Every morning you stood guard so nobody walked in while she attached the prosthesis to the stump. Still, you couldn't resist watching it yourself.
You're mute, Cindy. Cindy, you're mute.
Was I mute the whole time?
Yeah,
Oh,
Can I start over?
last sentence or two, Cindy. I think your
Okay.
cat did it.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, probably. Okay. All right, how about, and Deborah, the worst roommate of all. Rich blonde bitch who went through all your shit. Read your secret journals, told the whole dorm what was in them. A year later, you found out. Oh yeah, Talia said over waffles one morning. The dining room was so noisy she had to yell. Sometime last March. Forget about that, Talia's roommate laughed. We should have kicked her ass. Disgusted and forgotten were your most intimate thoughts. Hot fantasies about Cher. Poems you wrote to Joey, that bad boy poet, in Professor Steele's class. Mostly stuff about Joey. Scruffy chin, tattered leather jacket, and that attitude. Worse were childhood memories, like when you squashed a baby chick to see how it would look dead. How you wanted to see Deborah dead. You lay awake thinking about it, plotting it. Before that could happen, two others croaked. Sam Three Chin Jones, head of food services, and Hal, Mary Alice's fiance. Strange that both deaths were related to ice. Three Chin got bombed after work. On the icy highway, his car skidded, slammed into a guardrail, or maybe a tree. The crash was so grisly they couldn't find his head. Have to make one, the dorm cook told the squeamish girls. The Three Chin's death, the dorm had no meals all weekend. In frozen water, Hal's heart had given out. He was too heavy, too heavy. His mom sobbed at the wake. It's her I'm worried about, Mary Alice told you. Just you. Her huge black dress made you think of a joke. What's the difference, it went, between an Italian grandmother and an elephant? You felt bad for Mary Alice and guilty for that joke. You felt worse for the joke than for plotting Deborah's death. In the campus pub where Professor Steele held court, we all toasted to Hal's life. On the jukebox, Rod Stewart sang, "Tonight's the night." But it wasn't the night for Hal or Mary Alice. You were the last virgin left on the coast. All the phonies kissed Steele's ass so we'd buy pitchers of beer. Only you were different. Only you were a real poet. You wrote from your heart and your ass. Even better than Steele, and he knew it. His wife Lisa was a phony too. Always stoned on weed. 19 and giggly, she'd fucked every guy in the pub. In front of Steele at house parties, she'd let guys give her shotguns, blow pot smoke down her throat. Ugly as you were, you bet Steele thought, you and Joey were meant to be together. Joey needs, he said thoughtfully, a strong woman. You beamed. In Amazon you would be. When Joey's hot, like the 50-foot woman in that old sci-fi flick. Fashion buildings, squash his snotty girlfriend like she was a baby chick. Lisa was friends with Joey too. The way he gave her shotguns, you bet it was more. Joey said, Lisa told you in the bathroom, "You're not as tight, you gotta lose weight." Looked away. "You could do it," she muttered. "Just stay away from bread and fries." Sobbing, you trudged back to the dorm. Above you, the sky was like Hal's black, icy grave. In your head, you started writing a poem about it. But by the time you got home, your words were dead too. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Our next reader is Jacqueline Doyle. Her flash fiction chapbook, The Missing Girl, is available from Black Lawrence Press. Her flash has been published in Trampset, Wigleaf, Matchbook, Ecologist, and Friction, and featured in Creative Nonfiction's Sunday Short Reads. Jacqueline lives in San Francisco Bay Area. Jacqueline.
Thank you, Paul. And these have been great. This is a really great reading. I love everything I've heard today. I write probably more nonfiction flash than flash fiction at this point anyway. And I've had 2 come out in the last week and I'm going to read them. They're both flash microfictions. The first one is called Champagne. I remember what I was wearing that night, a tight, short, sleeveless white dress embroidered with blue and yellow flowers, espadrilles smudged with sand, gold filigree hoop earrings that he'd bought me in an expensive jewelry store that afternoon. I had a rare tan. The candle on the restaurant table flickered as we gazed into one another's eyes. His smile lit tiny fires all over my body. It was my last night after a year abroad in Europe. I was 19 years old and I was in love. I'd never had champagne before. I'd never been camping in a VW bus before. I'd never made love on a beach before, gazing up at the night sky, listening to the gentle crash of the waves. So many more stars in Greece than I'd ever seen at home. There were so many things I'd never done before. I kept touching my new earrings. I didn't think I'd ever see him again. I learned soon enough that he was prone to extravagant gestures, like tossing aside his life in Germany at a moment's notice to follow me to the US after he'd followed me to Greece. It was love at first sight. Like carrying me up the stairs in front of my housemates when he arrived, like marrying me on the grounds of a German baron's castle and abandoning his studies to follow me to grad school, like spending our meager savings on a BMW motorcycle without telling me first. The gas tank was teal blue, the color of your eyes, he said. Like leaving me to follow a coworker to Taiwan and leaving her to become a Tai Chi instructor, like leaving his next wife and 2 children. He fancied himself a romantic. I suppose he was a romantic. How many times did he surprise me with gifts and roses? Ordering a bottle of champagne was clearly unusual in this modest restaurant by the ocean. I don't remember where we were that night, somewhere on the coast heading south to the airport in Athens, where I'd catch a plane to the States. There was a ritual in the restaurant for the rare occasions when they served champagne, and the waiter was nervous. He brought over a number of champagne glasses and built a careful pyramid, glasses stacked on glasses, 4 or 5 rows high, uncorked the champagne, began to pour champagne into the topmost glass with a trembling hand. The champagne was supposed to cascade like a fountain down the rows, but one of the glasses tipped and the entire pyramid collapsed. We were ready to clap, but instead the waiter slunk away, ashamed, like a magician who'd botched a trick on stage, reaching behind his back for a bouquet of roses that turned out to be, voila, something else entirely. 5 wilting balloons leaking helium, a worn pack of cards, a sheaf of overdue bills. And so it was with the boyfriend whom I would later marry, unable to see beyond the promises he made to what was really behind his back. Roses that died too soon, betrayals revealed too late, a packet of apologies on thin airmail stationery. The next one is called Because I Could Not Stop for Death, and it opens with a little bit of information from a New Yorker article by Larissa McFarquhar, The Memory House. People with dementia often ask to go home. Many nursing homes and hospitals have installed fake bus stops. When a person asks to go home, an aide takes them to the bus stop where they sit and wait for a bus that never comes. On our nightly walks, my husband and I see a bus trundling by, lit up inside like the diner in Edward Hopper's Nighthawks, but completely empty. Every night, the dark outside, the artificial light inside the bus rumbling along the empty street. The silhouette of the driver, the rows of empty seats. We've contemplated getting on the Phantom bus just to see if it's real, but some superstitious dread prevents us. Imagine instead the Alzheimer's patient who sits patiently at a fake bus stop. I'm going home, the elderly woman says to no one in particular. She fiddles with the top button on her coat, plants her purse more firmly in her lap. The aide has promised to pack her bags and send them later. She's been waiting a very long time. When is the bus due? There's no schedule posted. She's hungry and tired and wants so badly to go home. Night is falling. Even as she waits, she knows that her home is no longer there. The cupboards with their orderly stacks of plates and bowls and cups, the drawers with silverware neatly sorted, the closets filled with outdated clothes she couldn't bear to part with, the yellow sofa she should have had upholstered, all gone. Still she waits. She can picture the Phantom bus so clearly, the empty interior brightly lit, the driver who will kindly stop for her. The brakes will wheeze as it pulls up to the bus stop. The folding doors will open with a thunk, and the courteous driver will get out to help her up the stairs. He'll be wearing a plaid shirt like her husband's. He'll comment on the weather, ask how she's been doing. Best get moving, he'll say. You don't want to be late for your family reunion. She stands and raises her arm, ready to wave when the bus appears. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Three more readers. Brad Rose. He's no introduction because I don't have his bio.
I'm sorry. Am I supposed to make one up?
No,
Okay, cool. I'll just read.
you can make it up if you'd like.
I'd like to lodge a complaint. Still no nomination for the Nobel Prize in Literature. Okay, I'm gonna read three short pieces. First one's called Red, White, and Blue Alligator Snakes. It's those damn patriotic snakes again. No, not the flesh-eating ones. They're not so bad. It's the gristle-eating ones that really get under my skin. Of course, we wouldn't be in this mess if Adam hadn't eaten from the tree of forbidden donuts, but that's all blood under the bridge now. Rome wasn't built in a day. Did you know that the sex of animal researchers affects the results of mouse experiments? Of course, I had no idea that mice conducted experiments, but only time will tell what time it is. Yesterday, after I departed from Sugar's, I returned to my temporary lodgings to contemplate why I must watch so much must-watch TV. My twin cats, Strum and Drung, skulked around and meowed so pitifully I had to threaten them with a one-way trip to Miss Kitty's alligator farm. Miss Kitty's corporate slogan is, "At Miss Kitty's, it's all bite and no bark." Those toothy carnivores are neither fish nor fowl. Like Patrick Henry said, give me treason or give me death. Penthouse. Took the express elevator, skipped the first 35 floors. Now I'm trying to remember my dreams and vice versa. So I'm feeling better, but worse. I'm sure it's too true to be good. What's your favorite temperature? Yeah, mine too. Although in the grand scheme of things, I'm sure it has its moments. Cinnamon says my personality is very Canadian, so I'm filing things in geometrical order just to be on the safe side. This morning, I chose the beard that's just right for me. Like the junior prom, what doesn't thrill you makes you stronger. In fact, there's no need to ban books. People are free to be as dumb as they like as long as they're willing to pay for it. Of course, most Americans want to be fired so they can rest assured. But don't just take my word for it. There's a whole world out there. It's better to be late than sorry. Yesterday, there was a dip in the national unemployment figures. You'd think everyone was trying to avoid an honest day's work. Then for a few minutes, it looked like the economy was on an upswing, but the Neptunists rallied and beat the Vulcanists. Of course, these days, everyone is an enemy of planet Earth, but it doesn't take a genius to know which side you're on. Although, like a penthouse, it all depends on who comes out on top. And the last piece is called Favorite Restaurant. The best things on the menu are organic, but I dislike it when my brains fall out of my ears. That really ruins my updo. Of course, like identical triplets, everything is bound to get worse over time. Fortunately, it can't be helped. Because of the recent mix-up with my dental surgeon, I nearly lost my favorite arm, but customarily when the pharaoh dies, isn't the queen buried with him? During the average lifetime, most humans will be stung by a wasp or a bee, so I bought the umbrella policy. It's still best to avoid the worst case scenario, unless of course you're an enfant terrible. In fact, since the advent of the new sleep regime, downtime has become so expensive, it's advisable to avoid the circular lightning, although what goes around comes around. Normally, I don't eat the chicken here, but in this case, I'll try to squeeze you in. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks, Paul.
Our next reader is Fee Easterling. He is the editor of a fairly new magazine called 10 by 10. 10 stories by 10 flash fiction by 10 different authors. And
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Finished. He put a plug in to submit, and I double that plug. He should submit. It's a good magazine.
You know, Paul promised me an hour to read tonight, but I guess not. Anyway, one thing I want to say about Gloria Mindock is that I have a book coming out with her at some point, and she is the toughest and best editor I've ever dealt with. So be aware of that. Shavana Barber Press. Absolutely great. Anyway, my first story is called The Curse. After the first performance of the opera Gloria Mundi in 1697, the composer's patron and the Pope condemned it as obscene, and the Pope placed a curse on the work. The next time it appeared, the lead singers died of plague shortly after the performance. It was a half century later before the next performance, and on the opening night, the conductor suffered a heart attack and died. It was more than 100 years in 1860 when the opera was rediscovered by a researcher at a library in London, England. After the performance, another conductor met his fate, this time by a runaway horse. In the 1960s, the owner of Lighthouse Records decided it should be recorded for posterity on his label, which he did in his new studio in New York City. A week later, while driving to pick up a well-known soprano to make master tapes of the arias, both he and his recording engineer died in an automobile accident. After that, the curse seemed to dissipate a bit, becoming not as serious as a terminal illness. So now we get to me. On a Saturday, I wandered into Lulu's record store at 72nd and Broadway and purchased the one copy they had of Gloria Mundi on a Lighthouse label, which features Anita Della Rossi singing the role of Alicia. That evening, I became ill. It may have been a cold, a flu, or some other virus. I was coughing, had a fever, unable to hold down food. I felt unsteady. So I took to bed along with 3 aspirins and hot tea. The next morning, I still ill, so I tried my father's cure, 3 shot glasses of schnapps, 3 hot teas, 3 blankets, and 3 more aspirins. It did not help, and I knew it must be the record I bought. I was fine before purchasing it. In desperation, I called my friend and opera aficionado, Claude Koppelman. We met in the US Navy, and I introduced him to his wife, Julia. I explained the situation, leaving out the history, but saying if he took the record album, nothing would happen to the 2 of them because I was the victim of the illness. Claude agreed to take the record since he had always wanted a copy. He had lost his along with some other items while moving in with Julia 5 years ago. They showed up about an hour later, and I passed the album to them through a crack in the open doorway. The next day, I felt 100% better, totally back to normal, with not a trace of the coughing or fever. I was able to wolf down a large breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast, a bowl of cereal, and 2 cups of hot coffee. 3 months later, Claude called me to say he and Julia had agreed to a divorce. And the next one is called An Old Joke. As the old joke goes, a rabid baseball fan dies and goes to heaven. At the pearly gates, he asks St. Peter if they play baseball up there. Of course, says St. Peter, there's a ballpark down the street and to the left. So the new heavenly arrival walks down the street, takes a left, finds the ballpark. He takes a seat in the grandstand next to an old man and says, wow, there's Ruth, Gehrig, Cobb, Wagner. But I don't know the guy with the long hair and a beard wearing number 7. The old man answers, oh, that's God. He thinks he's Mickey Mantle. This one is called, He Knew a Good Deal When He Saw One. When the email arrived, Herbert was at first quite excited. You have won the lottery in the amount of 7.5 million USD. To collect your prize, forward 1,500 USD to Prince Felix Abuwu at the address above. Herbert rushed to the bank at his good fortune, but then remembered he'd never bought a lottery ticket. This one is called Down Under, and this one actually is based on one I just read in the news. It was discovered that a Mondrian painting had been hanging upside down in the museum for more than 70 years. No wonder the museum's curator told the museum's board of directors, people have been standing on their heads to view it. Am I still there? Hello? Did I lose you?
I can hear you.
Oh, there we go. Okay, no, my screen went off. And the final one, which is also short, is called Long Nights. Long nights like knives cut deep. You wake up next to someone whose name you vaguely remember, Judy or Trudy, or maybe the last name is Moody. It doesn't really matter. After a cup of coffee, you'll be gone with a promise to call. She doesn't offer her number because she thinks you know it. There's a kiss goodbye that doesn't taste like the first one the night before. If you could remember what it was like, you don't, and it doesn't matter. The door to her place shuts behind you, shuts her in, shuts you out, shuts a part of the world out of your life. Open the door to your car and look ahead as you drive away. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Closing out our night is Richard Estes. You go by Sam or Richard?
I go by Sam usually, yeah.
Okay. Closing out our night is Sam Dees, reading from his novel, The Mirror and the Monkey.
I want to thank you, Paul, for being kind enough to have me read tonight. I'm so impressed with what I've heard tonight, and I'm cheating here because this is not flash fiction. But I'm going to read a very short chapter, 5-page chapter called The Monkey from this book, The Mirror and the Monkey from Pelicanissus Press. Here goes. The Monkey. A man who dreams he is a monkey, who dreams he is a fish, and a fish who dreams she is a dreaming monkey, who dreams a man but wakes a fish, are all the same. While the fish is awake and the man still slumbers in his wish, what difference really does it make who is a fish, a monkey, or a man? None but this: the world will break to wake the sleeping man. As the moon fell beneath the outer wall of the kingdom and cast the shadow of its thorny crest on the immense white dome of the palace, Urikiru came back home to find that Queen Ambu had given birth to a monkey. He let out a high laugh at first, thinking it was some kind of drunken dream, as he saw the queen hold the monkey to her breast and let him play with the hem of her blue silk gown. She caressed the dark hair on his back and called him Ololo, or Prince, in a tongue more ancient than the city of Cosmos. She brought him near the window so he could hear the congress of the passerine birds singing throughout the forest. Ambu spoke the language of the birds, which was lost to everyone else in the city, and she poured its sounds into his ear in a stream of whispers warm as mother's milk. Listen to the birds, Ololo. They fly farther in a day than any man or beast walks in a lifetime. Their songs will teach you all about the deserts, forests, lakes, and mountains, and the great sea that surrounds us all. As if to answer her, the child wrapped his tiny red hand around her little finger and let out a luxurious sigh. As Urikiru came closer, he had no more room to doubt that it really was a monkey who greedily drank warm milk from Queen Ambu's breast. The king became frightened for a moment, but soon felt an invincible rage rising from his gut to his chest and pulsing through his arms. He grabbed the queen by the throat and accused her of sneaking out beyond the high walls of Cosmos. It was you who planted that dirty little weed inside my kingdom. And now I see that you have opened your womb to the filthy seed of some ape out in the jungle. Ambu laughed at his wild accusations and implored the king to look at Ololo. His eyes are yours. Look at him move and hear the music that he speaks. He has your wit and speed. And when I hold him to my breast, he has your touch and tenderness. The king could not bear to look at the monkey, but Ololo saw the king's white hair, broad shoulders, and blood-stained body, and thought he was magnificent. It was only when the king drew his obsidian dagger that Ololo learned to fear him. Now he held the dagger by the tip of its blade and cocked his arm behind his head, ready to send it flying. The monkey leapt in a panic and darted from left to right. With every move he made, the king's eyes followed him. When the monkey froze in fear with an open window at his back, the king sent his dagger flying. Queen Ambu locked her eyes on the dagger, and it stopped in midair, just so long as she kept her eyes upon it. She stepped in front of her child and stood in the path of the dagger. If you would touch a single hair on his back, you will have to kill me first. Then she raised her eyes to look directly into the king's, and the dagger resumed its flight, piercing her flesh and finding its home in her heart. She kept her eyes locked on the king's as her body fell backwards out the palace window. Queen Ambu tumbled down the palace wall and landed in the same spot where the yellow flower had grown the day before. 3 of the king's soldiers, still drunk with wine, had lingered in the plaza to sing songs about the glories of that day's battle. When they saw what the king had done, they cried out in horror. Urikiru stood on the balcony and looked down at them. For a long moment, he said nothing, for all the words he knew had fled his mind in fear. But then the rage rose in his chest again, and his voice boomed with anger, even as it cracked with grief. He ordered them to take the queen away and cast her body in the dank stone vaults deep below the city, where not a soul would see it. Be sure to scrub the paving stones before the sun is up. Each of the 3 soldiers took off his dark wool cape, and together they made a shroud that they wrapped with great care around the queen, concealing her and absorbing the blood from her mortal wound. Then they scrubbed the ground as best they could, even as their tears fell and mingled with Queen Ambu's blood. As hard as they tried, they could not remove the deep red stain in the space between 2 paving stones. The king told them that the work they had done was good enough and sent them deep below the city to leave Queen Ambu's body there. He praised them all as loyal soldiers, then locked the gate behind them and waited for the pale tribe of alligators that lived beneath the city to do its work. As he heard the screams of the 3 soldiers echo through the chasm of his privy and then disappear, the king stood up and emptied his bladder, then licked his chops again to taste the lingering traces of dragon's blood. This had been no accident, the king surmised, but only what was necessary. He was right to kill the faithless Queen Ambu and the traitors who had mourned her. Now he would kill the monkey. He could hear the little beast weeping, and he followed the sound of his sobs as they echoed through the palace. Ololo saw the king coming after him and grabbed onto the sunburst chandelier that hung from the center of the palace dome. Everything within the king's reach, from saucers to bowls to torches mounted on the wall, was suddenly a weapon to be hurled at the hated thing. The monkey was agile, dodging every missile, large and small, flaming or sharp, that came his way. Leaping high and low and here and there, the monkey exhausted the king, just as the king had used his wiles to deplete the strength of the dragon. Short of breath, but driven by an unstoppable rage, the king chased the monkey through every room of the palace, from the deepest basements to the highest parapets, but the agile Ololo was always just beyond his reach. Finally, the king called on his 2 most trusted confidants, Thorn, the tall assassin who knew 10,000 ways to kill, and Racklevor, the man with fat hands and a baby face who knew just how to keep a secret. The 2 men arrived without delay, and the king gave them their payment in advance. To Racklevor, he gave his gold medallion, which bore a portrait of the king floating on a cloud with his bow and quiver of arrows on one face and a map of Cosmos on the other. To Thorn, he gave his golden hunting bow and quiver of 12 golden arrows. Thorn and Racklevor were astounded by these gifts, and so they did not dare to speak. The king's eyes seemed to look straight through them and far into the distance as he said, "A wicked monkey from beyond the city walls has invaded this palace. You 2 will catch it, take it far into the wilderness whence it came, and make it disappear forever. And then you will never speak a word of it on pain of death." And with those words, the king went to his private chamber, determined never to think of the monkey again. Thorn and Racklevor set out to catch the monkey. From the basement to the parapets, their luck was hardly better than the king's had been. Twice Ololo stood long enough for Ralcovor to lunge at him, and twice the monkey leapt straight into the air and let the ample secretary fall face first to the floor. Thorn watched Ololo's games with some amusement until they came to the cool dark sea that surrounded the island of the world inside the palace. On the edge of the little sea, the monkey caught sight of his own reflection, then squeaked and ran away in fear. The assassin called the exhausted secretary to his side and whispered in his ear. As Ralcovor wiped his brow and let out a mischievous giggle, Thorn took a mirror down from the wall and walked slowly toward Ololo with it. Terrified at the sight of the monkey in the glass, Ololo turned and ran again, straight into the darkness of Ralcovor's black silk bag. Their prisoner now in hand, Thorn and Ralcovor marched off into the night to earn their pay. Thank you.
Well, that wraps up our night. I would like to thank you all for coming. Gary, you were great, and thank you for bringing Dana, Melissa, Chris, and Tony with you. They all added to the tenor of the evening. If any of you decide you'd like to read again, you have my emails, just send me an email. We don't have anybody read two months in a row, but we'll work it out. And if there's any questions, I'll answer them. If there's not, I will say goodnight.
Thanks,
Good to hear
Paul.
you read, Paul.
Thank you,
Thank
Paul.
you, Paul. This was just wonderful. The readings were great. We enjoyed
Everything
them
was
all.
wonderful.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks, Gary,
Thank you, Paul.
everybody.
Thank you all. This is one of our best.
Yeah.
Happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
You guys. Happy Thanksgiving. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, Paul. It was so great to read with everybody.
Happy birthday
Thanks,
again,
Paul
Paul.
and Gary.
And
Bye.
be sure to have potatoes with your turkey.
Good night.
Lots of potatoes.
Lots of potatoes.